Good morning, healthy individuals, and welcome back to Cancer's Casket. Today, I wanted to cover something that I feel like everybody here could probably relate to. Something that flipped the narrative and redefined our lives for a solid 2 years. Something that was simultaneously erased from our memories and yet was also burned into our brains. For those still guessing, I'd like to introduce you to an old acquaintance, the mask. Feels like a lifetime since we last used these, right? Well, it would be, except for the fact that for the better part of a year now, these have been basically an extension of me. Let me explain. With cancer, and by extension the treatments, often what you will see is that as a side effect, a person's cell counts will begin to drop. Now lies the question, what are cell counts, and what the heck does that even mean? Well, depending on what your doctor needs to check, they'll send in a blood requisition, a paper that tells both the nurse drawing the blood how many vials to siphon from you and the lab what to specifically look for in the blood. Then once the lab sends back the results, your doctor, and by extension you, will get back a CBC or a complete blood count result. To further explain, I found an older chart of mine from a few months back, and for me specifically, there are four main things you tend to always look for. Those being white blood cells, red blood cells, platelets, and neutrophils. Now the first three are pretty self-explanatory. White blood cells are the ones in charge of your immune system, red blood cells are the ones that carry oxygen throughout the blood, and platelets are the cells in charge of helping blood clot so you don't bleed out after getting a paper cut. However, neutrophils is where things start to get a bit interesting, since I was always told by my doctor that they determined how good my body's immune system was, which always confused me because I thought that the white blood cells were already accounted for. And it was only now when I did some research that it all started to make sense. You see, the body makes about 7 types of blood cells, the first two being the red blood cells and platelets. But then things start to change since now the remaining 5 cells are all different types of white blood cells, each serving a distinct yet collective purpose of building the body's immune system. So in the chart, when it refers to white blood cells, what they actually mean is the total amount of white blood cells, as each of the 5 cells make up different percentages of the total white blood cells. For today, we're going to focus on neutrophils, but I'd encourage you to look into the other cells as well, as they're quite interesting in their very own respect. Now, neutrophils are actually considered to be the first line of defense in the body when fighting off bacteria and infections, which makes sense given how they make up anywhere from half to 3/4 of the total white blood cells. It's safe to say that if these go down, the body's going to have a much harder time dealing with anything that comes its way. And it depends on the specific situation, but generally, if my neutrophil counts were below 1, or in other words, below 1000 cells per microliter, I was considered to be neutropenic. For those of you who don't know, being neutropenic is just the fancy word doctors like to use to tell you that a sneeze could send you to the ER. Because like I said, without that strong first line of defense, something as simple as catching a cold or a fever can and will land you a room at a 5-star, all-immersive experience that is your local hospital. So, by now, you're probably asking how this has anything to do with masks like I mentioned at the beginning. Well, if you don't want to land a stay at your local hospital, you really only have two other options. Live life like a hermit until you're better, or relive the best 2 years of your life and go back to wearing a mask everywhere you go. And though I've been guilty of avoiding social interaction as if it were the plague, I eventually chose the latter of the two and chose the mask. So yeah, grocery store? Mask. Bank? Mask. Appointments? Mask. Random Burger King bathroom? I think you get the point. So yeah, for the better part of a year now, it's just been me, foggy glasses, and the occasional awkward conversation because the person next to me can't understand my muffled yapping underneath a mask. Anyways, that just about covers today's video. I hope I was able to make your day at least a little brighter. Have a great new year, stay healthy, and until next time, keep living.